Evangelical Church, non-conformist church, non-Anglican. And after 1517, the Reformation by Martin Luther started in Germany. And then here, Anglican Church started by Henry VIII, and around since 1532. And then 1620, around, like a non-conformist Puritans left this country, some of them to the USA, America. But most of the Puritans left. They kept this country as a non-conformist. They are persecuted by Anglicans, some killed, many pastors, but they are very evangelical, and then they go out to the streets to evangelize people, John Wesley or something like this, or like we say Puritan group, evangelical group. So this church is also founded by the non-conformists. They didn't follow the Anglican. They need to have a freedom to speak, to evangelize on the street, not focus on the liturgy, just only reading the form, but they are very freely and praise God and spontaneously praying to God. They enjoy God's presence. So this church started as a non-conformist. You can see it in all some plaques there for this chapel is kind of for the non-conformist ministers and the congregation. So this church, so now the history 375 years old. And then here we can see the late ministers for this chapel, especially in Mainz. We say you see here, Robert Thomas, from 1847 to 1884. For 37 years, Robert Thomas ministered this chapel. He was father of the Thomas, missionary Thomas, this guy, who sent to Korea in 1864, something like this. He was grown up here, and he says he was 9 years old. He came to here to follow father's ministry here, and he grew up the adolescence, and he studied in the seminary in London, and he married with Carolina, and then he came here to be ordained and then to be sent to the Korea as a missionary. So this chapel ordained him and sent as a mother church Korea by the mission organization says LMS, London Missionary Society. So his father was a very wonderful guy, wonderful minister, and full of the Spirit, and he preached in the gospel, the power of the cross, and very missionary. Uniquely, in ways, only Father Thomas, the minister, pastor, sent the missionary fund to the LMS in London. Only him participated in the mission by supporting the money through this chapel. And his ministry was very successful, and he started in the Welsh service and English service. He was first in this area. They spoke in Welsh, still, but no English service. But he started in this chapel English service, Welsh service. So his ministry was very successful, and the congregation came to here is very full of this chapel, and Sunday school was full with the children. And Thomas, and after finishing his seminary, his age was 24. He was sent to Korea, South Korea, and his age 17, as I said before. Stephen, this chapel. In this chapel, he preached his first sermon, first preaching, according to the Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is some important calling from the Bible. He was very enthusiastic, passionate for the gospel, for the mission. Yeah, only he's 24 age, yeah, very young man, and after marriage immediately he left to Korea as like a honeymoon with a bride. But after arriving at Shanghai, just he arrived in November or the early of the December 1864 or something. But next year, in spring, his wife died because of a miscarriage. So Thomas was very, torn. His heart is broken.
His wife died in China.
In China, yeah. So he had honeymoon, yeah. But Thomas was so broken and so heartbroken, sad and very frustrated. But he overcame his barrier, his obstacle. Again, he met some Korean guys through the Sanjun, customs, and his calling for the Koreans was burning. Yeah, again to pass the gospel to the Koreans. And then he tried to go to the Korea, some island, firstly, 1865, and then the second exploration, he started in the mission to Korea with Bibles and boarding on the General Sherman American commercial ship. But unfortunately, at the time Korea closed the door to the foreigners, and then they involved in fighting against, and all crews died and killed, and including Thomas. But the last time at the beach, he was caught by the Korean army, Navy, and then he shouted, "Jesus!" Yes, in Korean. He learned Korean language. He spoke.
Can you say in Korean?
Jesus, yes, yes. The executioner, yeah, and then gave the Bible. Chinese letters Bible at the time, and the Bible he gave. And then the executioner received, Pak Chung-won, Mr. Park received, and then later the Bible delivered to the post, and then later. The Bible, the papers, wallpapers, yeah, so the house, like a hostel. Later, the hostel, 20 years later, some place, like a first Korean church in Pyongyang, Noltariko Church. Later, the center of the Korean revival in 1907, Jangdaehyun Church, the center for the Korean revivals. Later, some 30 years later. So his martyrdom became a seed of the gospel for the Korean Christianity. His death, his killing was not in vain. God used his life as a sacrifice to save the Korean people, one nation, by one young man. So still, he became a legend and legacy. Also, this chapel with him, with the ministry, and then Koreans this chapel still again and again. We are inspired by his sacrifice for the gospel, for the mission, for the life of Jesus Christ. So you are here today. Again, we want to learn his spirit. And then want to follow the Jesus step, like Thomas, to give the tracts and the gospel with our life. I believe God will bless you, your step, your journey. Pastor Paul is like a warrior to bring people to the battlefield for God's kingdom, God's glory. So we are here today. I bless you, and then God will guide you and lead you today. Door to door, house to house, person to person, God will transform their life through your steps, through your evangelism. God bless you.
Amen. Give the cloud offering for Lord Jesus. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Thank you.
감사합니다. 기도.
Thank you. Yeah.